What's up, Summoners? I hope that you guys are doing well. My name is Irene, and I'll be your host for this video. And I'm going to be running through the best top laners for this patch. Included in this video are builds and our analysts' thoughts on the strongest champions. So if you're looking for the best meta picks, you guys are in the right place. Hit that sub button so that we can continue making content just like this though. Every sub helps. Now, let's hop into the video. To nobody's surprise, our first pick is YORICK. YORICK absolutely popped off last patch as a true monster in the top lane. With his buffed E, YORICK received a major increase in his damage because his ghouls now deal damage the moment that they jump onto you. This significantly increased YORICK's poke damage, which not only made him more oppressive against melee champions, but also gave him a solid fighting chance against ranged ones. After a single change, he rose up and became the second most popular top lane champion in the game. By the end of patch 11.7, he had nearly a 77% win rate. And oh boy, that is really, really high when the sample size of games was around 800,000. It's a new patch now, and even though YORICK has been nerfed, he has still come out net positive in terms of power. Overall, he's gotten a ton of quality of life buffs that make him a lot more functional. Rather than being some odd niche pick, YORICK is now a solid laner and a terrifying split pushing champion. Laning against him really comes down to whether or not you're able to dodge his E. It's not very easy dodging it, and every time it hits you, you can't help but feel your soul get crushed a bit as you watch a solid chunk of your health disappear. The buffs to Trinity Force obviously helped him a ton as well. Against both tanks and other bruisers, YORICK proves to be a strong pick. His high sustain, high damage, and passable crowd control allow him to control the flow of the lane quite well. His Q's short cooldown also means that there's never a point where he is super weak. Even if his other abilities are on cooldown, he still has a decent fighting chance at all times. Throw in his ultimate, and it's basically never a 1v1 against him. Also, here is our question of the day. Which top laner needs a buff? In my opinion, Kennen doesn't feel that good to play anymore. Top laners can just build Stridebreaker and run him down. While Kennen is a ranged champion and should have an advantage in lane, he doesn't do so well in all-ins. And when champions can force aggressive fights, it feels pretty tough. Let me know your answers in the comments below, and let's go on with the picks. DARIUS continues to dominate in the top lane. By the end of 11.7, he retained a 30% ban rate in high elo. So yes, even if you're in low elo and hate him with a passion, you should know that even players that are higher ranked than you share the same sentiment. He continues to be an oppressive champion as arguably the strongest champion in terms of raw combat power. You need to go for some sort of outplay to beat DARIUS because taking him head on in a fight to the death will almost always end in death because of his passive and high damage output. The fact that he can apply a bleed and also gain a massive boost of attack damage so early on in the game makes him extremely hard to deal with, especially if you're not very good at kiting or looking for bursty short trades. This patch, DARIUS has also received some jungle buffs, but not only is he a potential flex pick, he's also a better counter jungler as a result of the increased passive damage to monsters. Just having the extra potential to flex into the jungle makes his presence just that much more oppressive during champion select. CAMILLE has made great use of the recent buffs to Trinity Force. She is a consistent pick in high elo, but finally fell below a 50% win rate recently. The buffs to Trinity Force were an instant hit for her. Now that she can stack up the passive on turrets, she's a stronger split pusher, a more terrifying diver, and players are probably a lot happier with their extra mythic passive stats. Since the item provides a little bit of extra movement speed now, there is so much more potential for outplays. CAMILLE is great because she's able to control the flow of fights incredibly well. Her Q and passive let her take fights extremely slowly, if she wishes. Bonus movement speed and an adaptive shield allow you to maintain your distance, and as soon as you're ready to hop back into a fight, you can use your E to close the gap and stun your enemies. During that stun duration, you can also decide whether you want to commit to a longer fight, or immediately back off as well. As a result, CAMILLE is such a strong pick in high elo, because she has so many options during the laning phase. Almost every matchup is playable because you can make little adjustments to your playstyle, build, or even which skill that you max first. What makes a solid top lane champion in solo queue is the ability to snowball leads and create pressure. Thus, it's almost always best to play a champion that can both split push effectively and dominate team fights. Again, the buffs to Trinity Force made her better at both of those things through increased damage. During teamfights, Camille's engage range is absolutely insane because of her two gap closers, her E and her ultimate. It has been a while since we've seen this guy dominate, but MORDEKAISER is back with a vengeance. As the Juggernaut, any extra damage is all that you really ever want. Well, of course you want mobility, but that wouldn't really be fair. Patch 11.7 featured a small buff to Mordekaiser's Q that our analysts didn't really think much of. Well, it turns out, however, that his win rate increased by a whole percentage, and he also shot up significantly in terms of popularity. There is a severe lack of AP damage in the top lane, but recently, things have been changing. Buffs to Rumble this patch and Sylas on 11.6 have slowly been making it more common, but let's not forget about Mordekaiser. Essentially AP Darius, Mordekaiser is extremely powerful in extended 1v1 scenarios. While he might not have a resetting execute, he can single out opponents with his ultimate, which ends up being extremely oppressive. Champions with low combat power, like enchanters, are put into nightmare situations anytime Mordekaiser gets in range of them. Immobile carries also suffer knowing that they're about to get ran at with nowhere to go. Against other top laners, it's obvious that Mordekaiser has a chance to thrive. Since so many top laners are melee champions, Mordekaiser has no issue finding a fight. His Q is a solid trading tool, while his W provides a ton of power, although it is on a rather long cooldown. He also has the option to cast his W for some extra healing, which isn't too bad either. One other strength Mordekaiser has is that he doesn't have a mana bar. You're free to cast your abilities as much as you like, while most of your opponents are going to have to worry about how often they're casting their abilities. I think one of Mordekaiser's biggest strengths is that he's a solid pick in so many different team compositions. He fills that role as a frontliner, but he's also AP damage, meaning that your mid laner and jungler are free to play AD champions. Picks like Yone, Yasuo, and Zed are very popular right now, so it's in most players' best interests to pick up an AP top laner to have ready. Which leads me perfectly to our next champion, Sylas. Sylas is considered a top tier pick in Korea. There is no denying that he is in a good place. As both a top and mid laner, Sylas has recently been putting out some great results. His trading is pretty incredible, as his W provides a solid chunk of damage as well as healing. On top of this, his passive now provides a ton of extra attack speed, meaning he can take those short hit and run trades much more effectively than before. Once ahead, Sylas can essentially one-shot anyone that gets in his Everfrost range. The slow sets up a free stun, and he gets to unleash a full combo to quickly burst down his targets. Again, with how scarce AP damage is right now in the top lane, there's a lot of reasons to pick Sylas up. Although Sylas admittedly does have some really hard matchups, he also has the ones that he dominates. Champions like Riven and Darius don't really provide very good ultimates for him to work with. But then there are champions like Gnar, who can't assert as much kill pressure, but give him an incredible tool to use later into the game. With Rumble recently being buffed, Sylas is also set to indirectly become a stronger top laner. The top lane has recently gotten a ton of newer faces, and if you want to get a head start on learning them, make sure to check out ProGuides.com, where we've got coaches who'd love to help you guys out. This is the patch where AP top laners make their return. Vladimir was also buffed, and yes, this also means mid lane Vladimir is stronger than before. But that's part of what makes Vladimir so great though. You honestly have no idea where he's going because he does equally well in both lanes. What makes Vladimir so strong in the laning phase is his Q. This ability is spammable, deals solid damage, and most importantly, provides an incredible amount of sustain. His empowered Q also provides an incredible amount of extra damage and healing, and getting hit by a single one can spell the end of the laning phase. If you're not able to poke down Vladimir low enough to begin applying kill pressure, he can slowly but surely work his way back up by using his Q off cooldown. The healing is rather oppressive, and even if all he does is break even, he's essentially won. Vladimir's scaling is absolutely top tier, and as a mid to late game carry, Vladimir is one of the best. One of Vladimir's biggest flaws is that he's somewhat reliant on flash during team fights. Although he can get the job done without it, the summoner spell practically guarantees that he'll one-shot an enemy, maybe several if they're clumped. Considering ranked games of the entire player base, Garen remains the most popular top lane pick. Unfortunately, he's the only guy that kept YORICK from claiming the throne. Through several patches now, Garen remains a solid, simple pick. He's easy to play, but a bit harder to play against. Since Garen is so straightforward, you have no choice but to learn how to kite and play around his cooldowns. Players who get greedy for minions, or who don't space their ranged basic attacks properly, eat a giant sword to the face, followed by League's iconic Beyblade meme. Garen's single target silence grows more valuable as the game progresses. Based on who is fed on the enemy team, a player can make that champion their main priority. While silenced, your opponent will have very few options while you just dish out tons of damage onto them. At the same time, Garen is very tanky because of his W and because his item build typically incorporates tons of defensive stats. And while we're talking about defensive stats, we basically feature Malphite every time. It's hard not to. Malphite continues to dominate and is still one of the best tanks if you're trying to carry. His ultimate is just way too good in team fights. In terms of laning, he's irritating to play against, and also strong because of his Q's range and high damage output. The strongest part about Malphite's laning is that there's no avoiding his Q damage. It's free poke every time, and if your champion doesn't have an answer built into their kit, you just lose every trade. Forcing an extended fight to avoid getting poked down is also pretty difficult. Not only does his Q steal movement speed, making it harder to chase him, you also have to deal with his E's attack speed reduction. The good news for players who hate this rock is that there are a lot more AP champions to counter him now. To summarize why Malphite is so good though, he's got a solid laning phase, and his ultimate makes him one of the best team fighters in the game. Another tank that's gradually gaining more popularity is ORNN. ORNN is a late game monster because he makes his teammates stronger as well. He scales up to become a solid frontliner and initiator, so he's not a simple utility bot either. ORNN deals an acceptable amount of damage with his W as well. This makes him a decent lane opponent, and as a result, he's definitely able to win lanes against opponents who aren't able to commit to long extended trades. Since ORNN is able to use his W as well as Grasp of the Undying to deal a ton of damage in a short period of time, you're able to quickly deal some damage and then run away while playing ORNN. Enemies trying to run at you and force fights have to be very careful of potentially getting slowed by Q and then stunned by his E. Since ORNN does have his Q, you can also blind pick him relatively safely. This is arguably his biggest strength, as you don't lose much for conceding a bit of farm in the early game. You'll always be relevant as ORNN because of your passive and long-range engage. And our final top lane pick is Riven. She continues to dominate high elo, but her results in low and mid elo aren't bad by any means either. As the top lane slowly becomes based around more explosive, mobile picks, Riven players have more opportunities to go for flashy outplays to get ahead. Riven's high mobility makes her one of the best picks into Darius. She can escape Darius's all-ins with relative ease because she has so many dashes and also avoids the sweet spot on his Q. This mobility also makes her great against several other champions. Being able to go right through the counter-strike on Jax, weave in and out of Aatrox's Q, and of course, dodging Aurelia's stun are some great examples of this. Essentially, Riven's relevance, aside from how strong she is also based on which picks are meta. As players are now playing more fighters, a lot of Riven's good matchups are becoming more and more popular. Since she's a champion that benefits heavily from finding early leads, it's no surprise that she's becoming more and more contested in high elo. That'll wrap up our top 10 broken top laners for patch 11.8. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Also, you can check out the description for a link to join our Discord. It'd be great to see you guys there. Until next time, I hope you guys find wins on Summoner's Rift, and I'll see you in our next video. And please, have a wonderful rest of your day.